Have you ever gone too hard, too fast? I want you to consider Jake. Now, Jake was struggling to manage his workload, to mentor his people, and to make the step up to a more strategic form of leadership. He was constantly being pulled away to tend to urgent matters that his team brought before him, left no time for the important things. They were left for later on. The only problem was that later on just never seemed to come. Now, I'm sure many of you can relate to that. Now, during coaching, we were exploring how he could gain and retain the initiative. Now, that's a phrase that we would use in the military a lot to make sure that we were controlling what was happening on the battlefield, and the enemy was responding to our plan rather than him responding or us responding to his. And so this concept of initiative, you had to gain and retain the initiative. Now, when it comes to the corporate world, the same concept applies, but with your calendar, with your time. You want people to respond to how you control your time, not you being controlled by how other people request your time. So we're working with Jake around how he could gain and retain the initiative when it came to his calendar, taking back control of his time, proactively dedicating space for what was strategically important. Now, that required him to make some change to the way that he used his calendar, right? And so he was pretty enthusiastic about this concept and went about doing so. Now, Jake came back to his next session and he was a little bit crestfallen, right? He'd sought to make these changes in his calendar only to have his boss ask him to wind them back. Now, when I inquired why, what was apparent was that he'd not just tried to make one or two adjustments and changes to his diary, but a whole raft of changes without considering the impact of others. He tried to go too hard, too fast. And as we explored what the best thing for him to do moving forward was, I asked him to define his MVC, his minimum viable change. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the concept of MVP, your minimum viable product. It's pretty common in innovation circles, in startups. The concept involves designing a new product that is not fully perfected, but one that is developed enough that customers will pay for it. It's the minimum viable version that customers will pay for. It may still have a bunch of issues. It may require a bunch of improvements over time, but they can occur with updates and upgrades and subsequent product versions, right? Your MVP is not where innovators and founders want their products to end up, but it's enough to get them started. And that allows time for them to gain a bit more cash flow and income, to build a client base, to also receive real practical feedback that is great in terms of utility for product development, right? It informs and enhances the future product developments that are going to come. Now, similarly, your MVC, your minimum viable change, is the smallest change that you can make that will make a meaningful or provide some sort of meaningful benefit to you, right? And meaningful benefit is important. It's not just some tiny change that nobody notices or doesn't make a difference, right? It's the smallest change that will make a meaningful difference, that will provide some sort of benefit. That's what makes it viable and worth doing. Now, the question might be asked, why not make a bigger change and get a bigger benefit? The reality is that every workplace is a system. It's a series of interconnected elements of people or processes. They all engage with each other to produce some sort of product or service or result. And each time you make a change to the way that you work within that system, ultimately it changes the system in some way. Drastic changes to your approach mean big changes to the system. And big changes are highly disruptive. They require lots of adjustment from a whole lot of different other elements and parties. It often takes a significant time and a whole lot of work to make the whole system work again, right? So small changes, however, well, they mean small disruptions. The system adjusts a whole lot easier. It's quicker. There's less resistance to those adjustments. And that means the system is ready for the next change to occur. And just like that product that gets upgraded over and over again, your approach to work, the changes that you introduce can come incrementally updated without much fuss. And it's a case of, I guess, evolution rather than transformation. And I think the more we try for real transformation, unless everybody's on board, the greater our chance of failure. Incremental change is better than ambitious failure. And that's a quote by Israeli psychologist Tal Ben Shahar. And so I would rather you make incremental changes and actually succeed rather than try and make big changes and risk failing, or at least interrupting and setting back the whole work system. Now, I want you to consider Simon. So he was facing the same issues that Jake was. Big workloads, suffering from the tyranny of the urgent at the expense of the important. And when we explored how he might retain the initiative with his time, he took a much more gradual approach. So first of all, he blocked out 90 minutes in his calendar once a week. And he set that time aside to tackle some of those strategic tasks that kept on getting delayed. Now, over a couple of weeks, those tasks got completed and he felt some sense of progress, which he really enjoyed. He started to be a bit more proactive in planning out his calendars in the weeks in advance and determining when he would be available for his team and when he would be offline. And 2 months in, he then shared what he was doing with his team and requested that they begin proactively planning out their week. If they had important aspects of their work that needed his attention and consultation, well, they could no longer wait until the last minute because the chances were his calendar would already be full and wouldn't be available. Now, after they started doing that, eventually a weekly team stand-up was introduced where team members could not only provide an update of their work and what they were doing, but also give indications of when they would need assistance and support, not only from Simon, but also from each other, from their colleagues. And so they were all coordinating the way that work was happening in the office. Now, by making a series of small tweaks, and then bringing his team along the way, he drastically shifted the way his team was operating. He changed the culture of his business over time. The reality is you can too. It all just starts with 3 letters, your MVC. So my challenge to you is, what's the MVC, the minimum viable change you need to make next week? Introduce it, reinforce it, and then do it all again.